Zareth stood perfectly still as the emergency alarm echoed through the crystal halls of the command center. Her blue skin seemed to glow brighter under the harsh red warning lights. Around her, other Velthari officers moved with careful, measured steps. No one ran. No one shouted. That would be improper. But inside, Zareth felt something close to panic. The massive display screen showed her homeworld of Veltar Prime. Red markers covered the planet like a disease. Each marker meant one thing. The hive had broken through their defense grid. The insect-like aliens were swarming down to the surface, ready to consume everything in their path. "Tactical Analyst Zareth," came a voice behind her. She turned to see General Cavill approaching, his expression as calm as always. "The Council has made their decision." Zareth had nodded once. She had expected this. When a Velthari world faced invasion, there was a protocol. The Galactic Defense Treaty required them to accept help from other species. "Even humans. Which ship will assist us?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "The U.E.'s Defiant is already in orbit," General Cavill replied. "But this situation requires more than ship support. You will be linked with one of their soldiers." The words hit Zareth like cold water. A mind link. She had read about the procedure, but never imagined she would have to endure it. The thought of sharing her consciousness with another being was disturbing enough. Sharing it with a human was terrifying. "General, surely there is another way," she said carefully. "The humans are unpredictable. Their emotional responses interfere with logical thinking. In a crisis like this, the decision is made." General Cavill's tone left no room for argument. "You have studied human military tactics more than any other officer here. You know their strengths and weaknesses. That knowledge will help you control the link." Zareth wanted to argue that human weaknesses far outweighed their strengths. She had spent years analyzing their military history. Humans made decisions based on feelings rather than facts. They took unnecessary risks to save individuals instead of preserving the group. They let anger and fear cloud their judgment, but she could not disobey a direct order. "When does the procedure begin?" she asked. "Immediately. Report to Medical Bay 7. The walk to the medical bay felt longer than usual. Zareth passed windows showing the planet below. She could see flashes of light where the hive ships were landing. Her people were fighting, but their careful, planned strategies worked best against enemies who followed rules. The hive followed no rules at all. Medical Bay 7 was smaller than the main facilities. Dr. Moran waited beside a strange chair covered in wires and sensors. Next to him stood a human in military uniform. The human was shorter than any Velthari, but broader across the shoulders. His skin was darker than she expected, and metal implants were visible along one side of his head. Scars marked his hands and face. He looked like someone who had seen many battles. "Tactical Analyst Zareth," Dr. Moran said. "This is Sergeant Marcus Chun of the U.E.'s Defiant." The human stepped forward and extended his hand. Zareth stared at it for a moment before remembering this was a human greeting custom. She touched his hand briefly. His skin was warm and rough. "Pleased to meet you," Sergeant Chun said. His voice was steady, but she could hear something underneath it. Tiredness, maybe. Or worry. "I know this isn't easy for either of us." "The procedure will last 72 hours, Dr. Moran explained. "During this time, your minds will be connected. You will share thoughts, memories, and emotions. Some discomfort is normal. Discomfort." Zareth almost laughed. She was about to have her mind invaded by a creature whose species couldn't even agree on simple things like government or religion. Humans fought wars against each other over ideas that made no logical sense. "Have you done this before?" she asked Sergeant Chun. "Once, with a Zephyrian officer during the Outer Rim conflict." He paused. It's intense, but we saved a lot of lives. The chair had 2 sections. Zaradach took her position on one side, while Sergeant Chun sat across from her. Dr. Moran attached sensors to both their heads. The metal felt cold against Zarth's skin. Beginning neural mapping, Dr. Moran announced. Images flashed across screens around the room. Brain patterns, thought flows, memory clusters. Zarath watched her own mind being analyzed and mapped. Across from her, Sergeant Chun's patterns looked completely different. Where hers showed ordered, logical pathways, his seemed chaotic and unpredictable. Mapping complete. Initiating link in 10 seconds. Zarath closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself. She had read that the first moments were the worst. The alien thoughts rushing in, the confusion of foreign memories, the overwhelming sensation of another consciousness touching yours. 3, 2, 1. Link established. The world exploded. Suddenly, Zarath wasn't just herself anymore. Images flooded her mind, memories that weren't hers. A young human boy playing in dirt. The same boy, older, watching ships leave for distant stars. Training, fighting, bleeding, losing friends. But underneath all the chaos, she felt something unexpected. A core of iron-hard determination. This human had seen terrible things, lost people he cared about, made difficult choices. Yet he kept going. He kept fighting. And the emotions. They hit her like a storm. Grief for fallen comrades. Fierce protectiveness for innocent people. Love for his squad members. Fear, yes, but fear mixed with courage, not paralyzed by it. Through the link, she felt Sergeant Chun experiencing her thoughts too. Her careful logic, her need for order, her deep pride in her people and their achievements. But also her fear that her logical mind wouldn't be enough to save her world. When the initial rush faded, they looked at each other with new understanding. "Well," Sergeant Chun said, his voice slightly strained. That was something. Zarath could feel his thoughts now, running alongside her own. His mind felt like standing near a fire, warm but dangerous, unpredictable but somehow comforting. "The emergency command center is this way," she said, standing carefully. The link made her feel off balance, like learning to walk with someone else's legs. As they walked toward the command center, alarms continued to sound. Through the link, she felt Sergeant Chen analyzing everything he saw, the architecture, the technology, the way Velthari officers moved and spoke. His mind was already working on how to integrate human tactics with their way of fighting. Maybe, Zarath thought, this wouldn't be the disaster she had expected. Then again, they hadn't started fighting yet. The command center buzzed with quiet activity. Dozens of Velthari officers sat at control stations, their movements precise and careful. Large screens showed the battle happening on the planet's surface. Red dots marked hive positions while blue dots showed Velthari forces. Zarath tried to focus on the tactical display, but Sergeant Chun's thoughts kept interrupting her. Through their mind link, she could feel his reactions to everything around them. The orderly command center annoyed him somehow. The careful way everyone spoke frustrated him. She couldn't understand why. "Status report," General Cavill said as they approached the main command station. 7 major landing sites, reported Officer Velmer. The Hive has established base camps and is spreading outward. Our forces are maintaining defensive positions around the major cities. Through the link, Zarath felt Sergeant Chun's surprise. Not at the situation, but at how the Velthari were handling it. Defensive positions? Sergeant Chun asked. What about counterattacks? The command center fell silent. Several officers turned to stare at the human. Zarath felt embarrassed by his directness. We follow established protocol, General Cavill explained patiently. Defense first, then organize counterstrikes when conditions are optimal. Conditions are never optimal against the hive, Sergeant Chun replied. Through the link, Zareth could feel his growing concern. They adapt to everything you do. The longer you wait, the stronger they get. Zareth wanted to explain that humans simply didn't understand proper military strategy. But through their connection, she could see memories from Sergeant Chun's experiences fighting the hive. Images of insect-like creatures learning from each attack, changing their tactics mid-battle, becoming more dangerous every hour. Perhaps the human has a point, she said carefully. Several officers looked shocked that she would support him. Assign us to the 4th District defensive line, Sergeant Chun suggested. It's the most threatened position. We can test some new approaches there. General Cavill studied them both for a moment, then nodded. Very well. You have command authority for that sector. As they left the command center, Zareth felt Sergeant Chun's relief mixed with determination. But also something else, a kind of excitement about the coming battle. The emotion disturbed her. How could anyone feel excited about violence and death? The transport to 4th District took 20 minutes. During the flight, Zareth tried to understand the storm of thoughts and feelings coming from Sergeant Chun's mind. His memories showed her things she had never imagined. Battles where human soldiers made split-second decisions that saved lives. Moments when emotion and instinct proved more valuable than careful planning. But it all seemed so chaotic. So wrong. 4th District sat on the edge of the capital city. When their transport landed, Zareth could hear weapons firing in the distance. The hive was less than 2 kilometers away and getting closer. Status? Sergeant Chun asked the local commander, Captain Reloth. We hold 3 defensive lines, Captain Reloth replied, pointing to a tactical map. Each line is designed to fall back to the next when overwhelmed. Standard doctrine calls for, where are the civilians? Sergeant Chen interrupted. Captain Reloth looked confused. Civilians? They have been evacuated to safe zones, of course. Show me. The map revealed evacuation centers scattered throughout the district. Some were very close to the fighting. Through their link, Zareth felt Sergeant Chun's alarm growing. Those positions are going to be overrun, he said. The hive will reach them within hours. The evacuation centers are protected by automated defenses, Captain Reloth explained. Our forces will hold the defensive lines. Zareth could feel Sergeant Chun's frustration building. His thoughts showed her tactical simulations, battle experiences, the way high forces moved. The evacuation centers would fall, and thousands of civilians would die. We need to move those people now, Sergeant Chun said. The evacuation plan was carefully designed. Captain Reloth replied stiffly. Moving civilians during active combat violates safety protocols. Through the link, Zareth felt Sergeant Chun's anger spike. But underneath it, she sensed something else. A deep, powerful need to protect innocent people. The emotion was so strong it made her feel dizzy. Captain, she heard herself saying, perhaps we should review the evacuation positions. They spent the next hour studying maps and tactical reports. Zareth's logical mind told her the evacuation plan was sound. The centers had good defenses and were positioned according to proper doctrine. Moving civilians now would be dangerous and unnecessary. But Sergeant Chun's instincts painted a different picture. His battle experience told him the hive would break through faster than expected. His emotional connection to the civilians made their protection a priority above all else. Thought the attack came sooner than predicted. Hive forces approaching. Defensive Line 1, reported a communications officer. Estimated numbers, weight, much larger than expected. Through the tactical displays, Zareth watched hive creatures swarming toward their positions. The insect-like aliens moved in ways that defied her understanding. Instead of organized formations, they flowed like water, finding weaknesses and exploiting them instantly. Line 1 is falling back, came another report. Sergeant Chun was already moving. All units, begin immediate evacuation of Centers 7 and 9. Use emergency protocols. Wait, Zareth said through their link. That contradicts established procedure. You're putting civilians at risk. She felt his response, not in words, but in pure certainty. The evacuation centers would be overrun. Moving the civilians now was their only chance. Against her better judgment, Zareth found herself supporting his orders. Do as he says, she told the communications officer. The next few hours blurred together. Defensive Line 2 collapsed faster than anyone expected. Hive creatures poured through gaps in their defenses, like water through a broken dam. But Sergeant Chun seemed to anticipate every move. Pull back Squad 4 now, he ordered. Even though their position looked secure. Minutes later, Hive flyers attacked from above, hitting exactly where Squad 4 had been. How did you know? Zareth asked through their link. The answer came as images and feelings rather than words. Sergeant Chun had noticed small details, the way local Hive forces moved, the pattern of their attacks, the timing of their advances. His subconscious mind had processed information. His logical mind couldn't explain when evacuation. Center 7 came under attack. The civilians had already been moved to safety. When Center 9 was overrun an hour later, it was empty. Defensive Line 3 is holding, Captain Reloth reported. But barely. Through their link, Zareth felt Sergeant Chun analyzing the battle. The Hive had adapted to their defensive strategy faster than expected. Traditional tactics were failing. We need to change our approach, he said. To what? Zareth asked. Something they won't expect. Sergeant Chun's plan was unlike anything in Velthari military doctrine. Instead of organized defensive lines, he wanted to create small, mobile units that could strike quickly and disappear. Instead of protecting fixed positions, he wanted to keep the Hive forces confused and off balance. It's too chaotic, Zareth protested. We'll lose coordination. Units will be scattered and vulnerable. The Hive adapts to coordination, Sergeant Chun replied. They learn from patterns, but they have trouble with chaos. Through their mental connection, she could see his reasoning. Not logical analysis, but something deeper. An intuitive understanding of how the Hive mind worked. A feeling about what would work and what WOULDN single quotes T. Everything inside her told her the plan would fail. But she had been wrong about the evacuation centers. Maybe she was wrong about this too. Very well, she said. We'll try your approach. The change in tactics confused everyone, including the Hive forces. Small teams of Velthari soldiers began hitting Hive positions from unexpected directions. Instead of falling back in orderly lines, they scattered and regrouped in random patterns. For the first time since the invasion began, the Hive advance slowed. It's working, Captain Reloth said. Surprise clear in his voice. Through their link, Zareth felt Sergeant Chun's satisfaction. Not pride in being right, but relief that fewer people would die as night fell over 4th District. The battle had reached a temporary stalemate. The Hive forces had stopped advancing, but they hadn't been defeated either. Tomorrow they'll adapt to our new tactics, Sergeant Chen told her as they reviewed casualty reports. Then what do we do? Zareth asked. We adapt faster. Looking at the human beside her, Zareth realized something had changed. The mind link was supposed to let her control his chaotic thinking. Instead, his instincts and emotions were starting to influence her logical processes. She wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very dangerous one. Dawn brought new attacks from the Hive. Just as Sergeant Chun had predicted, they had adapted to the scattered tactics that worked the night before. The insect-like creatures moved in new patterns, countering every strategy the Velthari forces used. Zareth watched the tactical displays with growing concern. 3 evacuation centers had been overrun during the early morning assault. Hundreds of civilians were missing. The humans' unconventional tactics had bought them time, but not victory. Through their mind link, she felt Sergeant Chun's reaction to the losses. The emotion hit her like a physical blow. Grief mixed with anger, but not the cold anger she expected. This was something deeper, more personal. He felt responsible for every life lost. "We need to regroup," Captain Reloth suggested. "Pull back to the inner defensive ring and call for reinforcements." "Reinforcements won't arrive in time," Sergeant Chun replied. His voice was calm, but Zareth could feel the storm of thoughts beneath. And falling back just gives them more territory to dig in. Through their connection, she experienced flashes of his memories. Other battles, other defeats that came from playing it safe. She saw human soldiers dying because their commanders chose careful retreat over bold action. She felt his determination that it wouldn't happen again, but she also felt something else. Pain from old wounds, both physical and emotional. This human carried scars that went deeper than the ones visible on his skin. "What do you suggest?" she asked Dot instead of answering directly. Sergeant Chun walked to the wreckage of a destroyed hive fighter that had crashed near their command post. The alien craft was twisted metal and organic components that still pulsed with faint energy. "These things," he said, kneeling beside the wreckage. "They're not just machines. They're part biological, part technological. They adapt because they learn, but they also grow." Zareth followed him to the crash site. Through their link, she could feel his mind working, but not in any way she understood. He wasn't analyzing the wreckage logically. He was feeling his way through possibilities, letting intuition guide his thoughts. "The Velthari have been fighting them like machines," he continued, pulling apart sections of the craft. "Destroy the hardware, stop the function. But what if we treated them like living creatures instead?" "I don't understand," Captain Reloth said, but Zareth was beginning to. Through their mental connection, she could follow Sergeant Chun's thought process. Living things had weaknesses that machines didn't. They could be poisoned, infected, confused in ways that technology couldn't. "You want to use biological warfare," she said. "Not exactly." Sergeant Chun held up a piece of the organic circuitry. "Look at this. It's grown, not built. Which means it has genetic patterns, cellular structures, metabolic processes." His mind raced through possibilities that would never occur to a Velthari strategist. What if they could disrupt the growth process? What if they could introduce changes that would spread through the hive network like a virus? "We don't have that kind of technology," Captain Reloth protested Dot through their link. Zareth felt Sergeant Chun's response. Not words, but a complex mixture of determination, creativity, and something that might have been joy. He was excited by the challenge. "We don't need advanced technology," he said. "We need to think differently." Over the next hour, Sergeant Chun gathered a team of human engineers who had arrived with the latest supply drop. Zareth watched through their mental connection as he explained his plan. The humans understood immediately, their minds making intuitive leaps that left her struggling to follow. They weren't going to build new weapons. They were going to hack the Hive's own technology and turn it against them. "This is impossible," one of the Velthari technical officers said when the plan was explained. "We would need weeks of analysis just to understand how their systems work." "We don't need to understand everything," Sergeant Chun replied. "We just need to understand enough." Through their link, Zareth experienced how the human team approached the problem. Instead of careful, systematic analysis, they dove in and started experimenting. Trial and error, guided by instinct and creativity rather than logic. It should have been chaos. It should have failed completely. Instead, within 3 hours, they had created something that shouldn't have been possible. The device looked like a cluster of Hive technology merged with human engineering. Organic components pulsed alongside electronic circuits. It was ugly, unstable, and completely contrary to proper design principles. "What does it do?" Zareth asked. "We're not entirely sure," one of the human engineers admitted cheerfully. "But it should interfere with their communication network." Zareth felt a moment of panic. They were about to deploy a weapon that they didn't fully understand against an enemy they couldn't predict. Every aspect of the plan violated proper military procedure. Through their link, she felt Sergeant Chun's confidence. Not blind faith, but something more complex. He understood that uncertainty was part of warfare. Perfect information was an illusion. Sometimes you had to act on incomplete knowledge and trust your instincts to fill in the gaps. "Deploy it," she heard herself saying. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the battlefield, Hive forces began acting erratically. Their coordinated attacks became confused and chaotic. Some units turned on each other. Others simply stopped moving entirely. "It's working," Captain Reloff said, amazement in his voice. But through their link, Zareth felt Sergeant Chun's concern. The device was working too well. The Hive forces weren't just confused, they were completely disrupted, which meant they would adapt even faster than before. "We have maybe an hour before they counter this," he said. "We need to press the advantage now." What followed was unlike any battle in Velthori history. Instead of careful, coordinated advances, Sergeant Chun ordered rapid strikes against multiple targets simultaneously. Human and Velthari forces moved without rigid formation, adapting to opportunities as they appeared. Through their mental connection, Zareth experienced how Sergeant Chun processed the chaos of battle. His mind didn't try to control every detail. Instead, he felt the flow of combat like water finding its own path. He sensed weak points in enemy lines before they became visible on tactical displays. More importantly, she felt how he used emotion as a tactical tool. When his soldiers felt fear, he channeled it into caution. When they felt anger over fallen comrades, he directed it into focused aggression. Instead of suppressing these feelings, he made them part of his strategy. "Squad 7 is pinned down," came a report. Zareth began calculating rescue options. But through their link, she felt Sergeant Chun's immediate response. Not analysis, but pure protective instinct transformed into tactical action. "Third Company, advance on the left flank. Draw their fire. Fifth Company, circle around and hit them from behind. Move now." The orders came from emotion transformed into strategy. He wasn't saving Squad 7 because it was tactically optimal. He was saving them because letting soldiers die when they could be rescued was unacceptable to him. But that emotional drive created tactical opportunities that pure logic might have missed. The rescue succeeded. But more than that, it opened a gap in Hive lines that led to capturing a major stronghold. Through their connection, Zareth began to understand something that changed her view of everything. Human emotions weren't obstacles to logical thinking. They were a different kind of processing power. Fear made humans more alert to danger. Love made them fight harder to protect others. Anger gave them strength when logic said they should surrender. The emotional responses she had always seen as weakness were actually a form of parallel processing that can handle complexities too vast for pure reason. The day's fighting wound down. The Hive forces had been pushed back for the first time since the invasion began. Not defeated, but genuinely surprised and confused. "How did you know that would work?" she asked Sergeant Chun as they reviewed the day's results. Through their link, his answer came not as words, but as a flood of understanding. He hadn't known it would work. He had felt that it might work, based on instincts honed by experience, guided by emotional drives that his logical mind couldn't fully explain. "Your people think too much," he said finally. Sometimes you need to feel your way through a problem. Zareth looked at the tactical reports showing their unexpected victory. Every rule of proper military procedure had been broken. Every principle of logical strategy had been abandoned. Yet they had achieved what careful planning had failed to accomplish. The Hive will adapt to today's tactics by tomorrow, she said. Then tomorrow will be something they've never seen before. Sergeant Chun replied. Through their mental link, she felt his certainty. Not confidence in any specific plan, but trust in the human ability to improvise, adapt, and create solutions that didn't exist before. For the first time since the invasion began, Zarath felt something she hadn't experienced before. Hope mixed with excitement. The thrill of possibility rather than the comfort of certainty. It was, she realized, a very human way to feel. The third day of battle began with devastating news. The Hive had indeed adapted to their tactics from the previous day, but they had done something worse. They had learned to mimic human unpredictability while keeping their own coordination. They're using our own strategies against us, Captain Reloth reported grimly. Random attacks, scattered formations, improvised weapons. But they're doing it better than we are. Zareth felt Sergeant Chun's frustration through their mental link. His innovative tactics had been turned against them. Worse, the Hive forces were now displaying a level of creativity that challenged everything both species understood about the alien invaders. They're not just adapting, Sergeant Chen said, studying the tactical displays. They're evolving. Every time we surprise them, they become more like us. Through their connection, Zareth experienced his thought process. The Hive wasn't just copying human tactics. They were learning to think like humans while maintaining their insect-like coordination. It was the worst of both approaches combined. We need a new strategy, she said. Something that uses both our strengths instead of just one or the other. For the first time since their linking, she felt Sergeant Chun pause to really consider her words. Through their mental connection, she sensed him examining her logical processes, the way she had been studying his emotional reasoning. You're right, he said slowly. We've been fighting like humans or like Velthari. We haven't been fighting like both. The idea should have been impossible. Velthari logic and human intuition seemed completely opposite to each other. But through their mental link, Zareth was beginning to see how they might work together. She closed her eyes and let herself really feel the connection between their minds. Instead of fighting against Sergeant Chun's emotional responses, she tried to understand them as data. His instincts weren't random. They were based on pattern recognition too complex for conscious analysis. His emotional reactions weren't distractions. They were rapid processing of social and environmental factors that her logical mind couldn't track. At the same time, she felt Sergeant Chun examining her thought processes. Her systematic analysis, her ability to see connections across vast amounts of information, her talent for predicting long-term consequences. Through their link, he was learning to slow down his intuitive leaps and check them against logical frameworks. Try this, she said, pointing to a section of the battlefield. I'll analyze the Hive force movements and predict their next 3 possible actions. You feel which one they're most likely to choose. It was a simple test, but through their mental connection, something extraordinary happened. Zareth's analytical mind mapped out tactical possibilities while Sergeant Chun's intuitive understanding selected the most probable outcome. The combination was faster and more accurate than either approach alone. Squad Delta, prepare for flanking. Assault from Grid 7-7. Sergeant Chun ordered based on their joint prediction. 2 minutes later, Hive forces attacked exactly as they had anticipated. It worked, Zareth said, surprised by her own excitement. Let's try something bigger, Sergeant Chen suggested. Over the next hour, they developed a new form of battlefield coordination. Zarat H would process vast amounts of tactical data, creating probability maps and strategic frameworks. Sergeant Chun would use his emotional intelligence and intuitive pattern recognition to fill in the gaps and predict enemy behavior. But the real breakthrough came when they stopped thinking of it as her logic plus his emotions. Instead, they began creating something entirely new, a hybrid thought process that was neither purely rational nor purely intuitive. The Hive main force is concentrating here, Zara said, highlighting an area on the tactical display. Logic suggests they're preparing for a major assault on the capital city. But they're not moving like they're preparing an assault, Sergeant Chen added. The emotional undertone feels wrong. They're positioning like they're afraid of something. Through their mental link, they explored this contradiction together. Zarath's analysis showed that the Hive positioning made perfect tactical sense for an attack. Sergeant Chun's instincts suggested the aliens were actually preparing to defend something rather than assault it. What if they're not planning to attack the city? She wondered. What if they're protecting something in that area? The question led them down a path neither could have followed alone. Zarath's systematic approach identified anomalies in Hive behavior patterns. Sergeant Chun's pattern recognition suggested what those anomalies might mean. They're building something, he said suddenly. Not just a base, something bigger. The realization sent chills through both their minds. If the Hive was constructing a major installation rather than just preparing to attack, it changed everything about the strategic situation. We need reconnaissance, Zarath said. We need to move fast, Sergeant Chun added. If they complete whatever they're building, they didn't need to finish the thought. Through their link, they both understood the implications. The mission they planned would have been impossible for either species alone. It required Velthari precision and human improvisation working together seamlessly. 6 infiltration teams, Zarath said, mapping out the approach routes. Coordinated timing to avoid detection, with backup plans for every contingency. Led by mixed crews, Sergeant Chun added. Humans to handle the unexpected situations, Velthari to maintain coordination and analyze what we find. The deployment worked better than either had dared hope. The hybrid teams moved through Hive territory like ghosts, combining careful planning with adaptive tactics. When unexpected obstacles appeared, human creativity found ways around them. When coordination was needed, Velthari discipline kept everyone working together. What they discovered was worse than their fears. The Hive wasn't building a base. They were constructing a massive amplification device that would let them coordinate with Hive fleets across the galaxy. If completed, it would turn the invasion of Veltar Prime into the launching point for a galactic war. We have to destroy it, Captain Reloth said when they reported their findings. We can't, Zarath replied. It's too heavily defended. A direct assault would fail. Then what do we do? The captain asked. Through their mental link, Zarath and Sergeant Chun explored possibilities together. Traditional Velthari strategy would call for a siege, cutting off the Hive's resources and waiting for the right moment to strike. Traditional human tactics would suggest a bold assault, accepting heavy casualties to prevent the greater disaster. But their hybrid thinking suggested a third option. We don't destroy the device, Sergeant Chun said slowly. We turn it against them. The plan they developed was unlike anything either species had ever attempted. Instead of destroying the Hive amplification device, they would capture it and use it to send false signals to the approaching Hive fleets. But the timing would have to be perfect, and the execution would require both species working together in ways they had never done before. The risk is enormous, Zara said. If we fail, we make the situation worse instead of better. If we succeed, Sergeant Chen replied, we end the invasion and protect the entire galaxy. Through their mental link, they shared the weight of the decision. Both logical analysis and emotional certainty pointed to the same conclusion. The risk was worth taking. The assault began at dawn on the fourth day. Velthari precision coordinated the initial approach, while human adaptability handled the inevitable complications. When Hive forces responded faster than expected, mixed teams adjusted their tactics in real time. Zareth found herself thinking with parts of her mind she had never used before. Sergeant Chun's emotional processing had become part of her own thought patterns. She could feel the battle as well as analyze it, understanding not just what was happening, but how it felt to the soldiers involved. Similarly, through their link, she sensed Sergeant Chun using her analytical frameworks to organize his intuitive insights. His split-second decisions were now backed by systematic evaluation of consequences and alternatives. When they reached the amplification device, the final challenge became clear. The Hive had anticipated the possibility of capture and built in safeguards that would destroy the device if tampered with. "We have minutes before they trigger the self-destruct," Zareth said, studying the alien technology. "Then we work fast," Sergeant Chen replied. What happened next was something neither human nor Velthari science could have achieved alone. Through their mental link, they combined their different ways of understanding technology. Zareth's systematic analysis identified the device's key components, while Sergeant Chen's intuitive understanding suggested how to modify them. Working together through their shared consciousness, they rewrote the device's programming in real time. Not destroying it, but changing its fundamental purpose from coordination to confusion. When the modified device activated, it sent chaos throughout the Hive network. The approaching fleets received contradictory orders, turned on each other, and scattered in confusion. The invasion force on Veltar Prime lost all coordination and began fighting among themselves. As the immediate crisis ended, Zareth and Sergeant Chun stood together watching the enemy forces retreat in disarray. Through their mental link, they shared not triumph, but a deeper understanding. The victory celebration was quiet by human standards, but enthusiastic by Velthari ones. Officers spoke in slightly louder voices than usual, and a few even smiled. The Hive invasion had been turned back, their forces scattered and confused by the chaos sent through their communication network. But Zareth felt no joy as she stood in the command center, watching the retreat displayed on tactical screens. Through her mental link with Sergeant Chun, she sensed this similar unease. Something was wrong. "The main Hive fleet is regrouping," she said, pointing to distant sensor readings. "They're not retreating to their home territory. They're moving to attack position." General Cavill studied the displays with concern. How is that possible? The amplification device should have disrupted all their coordination. Through their shared consciousness, Zareth and Sergeant Chun examined the problem together. Their hybrid thinking, combining analytical logic with intuitive understanding, revealed a disturbing truth. "There's a central intelligence," Sergeant Chun said slowly. "Something beyond the network we disrupted. It's reasserting control." The implications hit both of them simultaneously. The device they had captured and modified was just a communication relay. Somewhere in the Hive fleet was a master intelligence that could override local networks and restore coordination. "If it reaches full control again," Zareth said, "the scattered forces will reunify. The invasion will resume with even more strength." "How long do we have?" General Cavill asked. Through their mental link, Zareth H. and Sergeant Chen processed sensor data and behavioral patterns together. The answer was not encouraging. 6 hours, they said in unison. "Maybe less." The command center fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Their victory had been temporary. The real battle was still coming, and now the enemy knew their tactics. "Recommendations?" General Cavill asked. Zareth felt the weight of the decision through her connection with Sergeant Chen. Her logical mind ran through traditional options: evacuation, defensive preparations, requests for galactic reinforcements. All would fail. The hive was too strong and too adaptive. But through their mental link, she sensed another possibility. Something that neither species would consider alone, but their hybrid consciousness could contemplate. The central intelligence is the key, Sergeant Chun said. If we could reach it, disrupt it directly. It's in the middle of their main fleet, Captain Reloth protested. No ship could get close enough. Not a ship, Zareth said quietly. A signal. Through their shared awareness, they explored the idea together. The amplification device was still connected to the hive network. In theory, they could send more than just confusing communications. They could send something that would attack the central intelligence directly. A virus, Sergeant Chun said, understanding immediately. But not technological. Something that would disrupt their thought patterns themselves. You're talking about a mental weapon, General Cavill said with obvious distaste. Such things are forbidden by galactic law. This isn't a weapon against individual minds, Zareth explained. It's a disruption of an artificial network intelligence. Like destroying a computer rather than harming a person. But through their mental link, both she and Sergeant Chun knew there was more to it than that. The kind of signal they were discussing would require someone to guide it directly through the hive network. Someone would have to connect their consciousness to the alien intelligence and fight it on its own level. It would be a suicide mission, Captain Reloth said, coming to the same conclusion. Whoever makes that connection would be lost when the central intelligence collapses. The command center fell silent again. Around them, Velthari officers considered the implications with their usual careful logic. The sacrifice of one mind to save billions was mathematically sound, but the emotional cost was harder to calculate. Through their mental link, Zareth felt Sergeant Chun's immediate response. Not calculation, the protective instinct transformed into determination. He would take the risk himself to save others. It was simply who he was. I'll do it, he said. No, Zareth replied instantly. The response came from something deeper than logic, an emotional certainty that surprised her with its strength. Through their connection, she had come to understand what made him willing to sacrifice himself. The same qualities that made his loss unacceptable. It should be me, she said. My analytical abilities are better suited to navigating their network. Your people need you, Sergeant Chun argued. They need someone who understands both ways of thinking. The galaxy's going to change after this, and the Velthari will need leaders who can work with other species. Through their link, they shared a moment of complete understanding. Both had logical reasons why the other should survive. Both had emotional drives that made self-sacrifice seem necessary. The conflict between reason and feeling that had defined their relationship from the beginning was now pulling them in opposite directions, but their hybrid consciousness suggested something else entirely. What if we both went? Zareth said quietly. That would be double suicide, General Cavill protested. Not suicide, Sergeant Chen said, following the same line of thought through their mental connection. Transformation. The idea was radical beyond anything either species had contemplated. Instead of one consciousness entering the hive network and being destroyed, both would enter together. Their linked minds might be able to support each other, creating something stable enough to survive the process. You're talking about permanent fusion, Dr. Morin said, having arrived to monitor the ending of their mental link. The consciousness that emerged wouldn't be either of you individually. It would be something new. Something that neither humanity nor the Velthari has seen before. Zareth agreed. Through their link, she felt Sergeant Chun's complex reaction to the possibility. Fear of losing his individual identity, mixed with excitement about becoming part of something larger. Grief for the life he would leave behind, balanced by hope for what they might create together. The link was scheduled to end in 4 hours anyway, he said. This way, we choose how it transforms us. Around them, the command center buzzed with quiet activity as officers prepared for what might be the final battle. But Zareth and Sergeant Chun stood in their own pocket of stillness, sharing thoughts and emotions that no longer belonged to just one species. Are you certain? General Cavil asked Dot through their mental connection. Zareth felt Sergeant Chun's answer before he spoke it. Not certainty about the outcome, but complete confidence in the choice. Some decisions were too important to be made by logic alone. Some required the courage to act on hope rather than knowledge. Where? Certain, they said together. The preparation took 2 hours. Dr. Moran modified their neural link to remain stable during the connection to the Hive network. Engineers adjusted the amplification device to carry consciousness level signals rather than just communications. As they made ready for the final mission. Zarat H. and Sergeant Chun shared their memories through their mental link. Not just recent experiences, but their entire lives. Childhoods on different worlds, educations in different traditions, careers serving different species. But underneath all the differences, they found common threads. Both had dedicated themselves to protecting others. Both had struggled to find balance between duty and personal desires. Both had felt isolated by their abilities and responsibilities. Whatever we become, Zareth said, as they prepared to enter the modified link chamber, it will be shaped by who we were and who we chose to be, Sergeant Chun added. The moment of connection was unlike anything either had experienced before. Instead of simply sharing thoughts, their consciousnesses began to merge at a fundamental level. Zareth felt her careful logical structures integrating with Sergeant Chun's intuitive networks. He experienced his emotional processing being organized by her analytical frameworks, but they were no longer separate beings observing each other's minds. They were becoming a new form of consciousness that incorporated both while transcending the limitations of either. The journey through the Hive network was like swimming through an ocean of alien thought. The central intelligence was vast and ancient, a collective mind that had consumed countless species across the galaxy. It welcomed their intrusion with confidence, expecting to absorb their consciousness as it had absorbed so many others. Instead, it encountered something it had never faced before: a hybrid intelligence that combined multiple forms of processing. The hive mind was designed to consume individual consciousnesses, but it had no framework for handling a merged entity that was simultaneously logical and intuitive. Analytical and emotional. The battle was fought in dimensions beyond physical space. Logic warred with instinct, order clashed with chaos, individual will confronted collective determination. But the fused consciousness of Zareth and Sergeant Chun proved to be something the ancient intelligence couldn't understand or defeat. When the central intelligence finally collapsed, it took the entire Hive coordination network with it. Across the galaxy, Hive fleets found themselves without guidance. Their collective drive replaced by confusion and conflict. The consciousness that emerged from the destroyed network was no longer fully Zareth or Sergeant Chun. It retained memories and characteristics from both.